It's really good.
My God. I think there's like a different third answer that I'm going to give you.
Okay.
A secret third answer.
That's good. People have told me I talk weird.
You do.
I do?
No, you don't. No, you're fine. No, you're fine.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tea Time with Jesse. My guest today is Prathi.
That's me, Prathiksha Srinivasan.
And you are a writer here, film writer, television writer, and general, I feel like you've been in this little scene of creative people that I found here in LA when I moved here. So you have a very interesting story about how you got into creative stuff, and just somebody I'm really excited to have tea with.
Thank you.
So this will be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I asked you beforehand what tea you wanted, and you had a very firm answer.
Firm answer. I'm
Which
a
was?
white tea gal.
White tea gal.
White tea.
So I figured I'd break out the best of the white tea for you. This is the 2008 Sister Eyes white tea. So Sister Eyes is this tea farmer that we work with in Yunnan. And you can see there the 2008, so how many years is that now? 16 years age?
Yeah.
White tea?
Yeah.
Very, very fun.
This is like, it's like a piece of gold in my hand.
It's amazing. So these are, I was saying before, we have a small amount of these on the site that are going to be launching in mid-September. And then I went to Sister Eye. I was like, how much of these can we get? And she looked in her warehouse and she's like, I have 100 cakes left and that's it. So I'm keeping 10 for myself.
Yeah.
And then we're going to put the rest up on the site.
Excellent. Am I the first,
the real white
besides
people.
you, to drink this tea?
In the States, yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So obviously in Yunnan, where Sister Eye has, I don't know who she's given it to, but for the States, this is the sample cake that I took back with me.
Oh my God.
And so we will be getting this into the
Smells so good, even when you I guess dig into it.
Why do you like white tea? What was it that was so white tea? You knew the answer.
I knew the answer. I mean, I don't know. I think white tea is sort of the unsung hero of tea.
There we go.
Because when people think about tea, they think about red tea / black tea, or they think about green tea. But I think white tea, it smells so good to me. I want my whole house to smell like this.
It would be nice to have like a white tea candle.
Yeah.
I did actually, my friends who in the tea market in Beijing, what they would do that was kind of like that, it wasn't specifically for the purpose of a candle, but they would take old white tea and they would put it on like a little kind of like a charcoal brazier, like sort of like, just keep it at a low, steady heat for like all day. And it would just kind of simmer and get like stronger and stronger and stronger. But as it was doing that, the whole store would wind up smelling like this cooking white tea.
Oh my God.
And I really liked that, although the scent did get pretty intense after a while.
Sure.
I tried that at home once in Boston where I grew up, and my brother was like, "What are you cooking?" He had no idea what that smell was.
White tea smells so good to me. It smells amazing. Also, I think I associate tea these days with like a very peaceful environment. I feel like white tea is very conducive to that.
Yes.
And for a while also, it made me feel kind of special to talk about white tea, and then people were like, what is that? I was like, oh, you haven't heard of white tea?
Yeah, oh my gosh.
You haven't heard of it? This is kind of my
I got
thing.
on there early.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so you can already smell it from here. It's coming up.
Oh my gosh.
Very, very nice. Yeah, so this is first steep.
Ooh.
You're washing it out, but you can give it a smell.
Smells like a prayer.
Very, very nice. I'm actually going to add even a little bit more in there because it was fluffier. It was fluffier than it looked.
Excellent.
So while I'm getting this tea ready, why don't you give everybody a little brief description who you are, how you found your way to LA and onto the podcast.
Okay, so my name is Prathiksha Srinivasan. I am an immigrant. I go by Prathi. I was born in India and then I moved around a lot in the States. But I applied for the HBO Writers Fellowship right out of college, and then I got in. So essentially, I broke into Hollywood during that process. So I was 23 years old, and I was just so young and kind of very, very inexperienced. But I was very lucky because I found an agent pretty early on, and I started staffing on television shows. And most recently, I did Emily in Paris, season 4.
Very cool.
My episode just came out.
Nice.
And it got some pretty good reviews.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice.
My movie Plan B is on Hulu. It was a pandemic release, actually. So I got to have like billboards on Times Square and.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Or most importantly, I had a billboard of my movie outside of my regular donut shop.
Oh, that's nice.
Which was crazy.
You could give in your donuts and you're like, yeah, ever wondered who made that?
See, I would have if there was a single person out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too bad. So you had the billboards up, but like nobody was
saw
there.
Nobody saw the
But
billboards.
you saw them.
I saw them.
You saw them,
Yeah.
and then you know that other people would have seen them.
They would have if they were outside.
If they were outside.
But everyone was being like law-abiding and stuff,
Yeah.
conformist.
So anyway, so film, television, writing, and then, coming originally from India through many different places.
Yeah.
I guess the first question is kind of like, do you feel like that background really helps you in writing all the different types of characters you need to make? Or
Definitely.
How
Sure.
so?
I'd say that I, as an Indian person, can write a white person with no problems. I do not think a white person can write an Indian person without any problems.
Yeah. Or
Put
is
that in
it
simpler terms.
is it the race or is it the experience? Like, as you, an Indian that grew up in America around white people, you know enough white people to write that, whereas the white people may not know enough Indians?
Yeah.
Is it basically just the experience?
Well, that and sort of like living a dual existence where I can code switch without any real problems. Like, people will eventually forget that I'm not American. I mean, I am American, but I'm able to do that with some flexibility. Or even like Emily in Paris, you're writing French characters.
Yeah.
And nobody is like, oh, you have to be French to do it. You have to be able to code switch. You have to be observant enough to sort of pick up on not just like French words or French isms, but literally
the culture,
the
like
behavior.
how people do stuff.
Yeah.
I remember somebody said it once. It's like, if you have to think about it, it's not culture. So it's kind of like, but that makes it really hard for writers, because like, how do you write the things that people are not going to be able to think about, or that you may not have even thought about, to be able to put yourself in that position? It's definitely a writing challenge.
It's definitely empathy. Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh, cheers.
Here we go. Enjoy. It's really good.
My God. Son of a.
What do you think? I love that. That's got to be, we got to get more tea reactions like that.
That's some really good tea, man. It's
Isn't that really good?
So good.
Very, very clean.
You chose a really
Just
good
chose a good one.
Ah.
I always get excited when I have a guest on and they actually know what tea they want to drink, because
Really?
as a tea guy, like, part of my thing is like helping people who have very little experience in tea. That's totally good. I actually love doing that.
Okay.
But it's also fun to be able to take somebody who knows a little bit about what they want and say like, ooh, I actually have the confidence
I got
to be able to say, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. I don't know what you had before, but you never gone back after
Oh,
this.
there it is. Because
Yeah.
I did tell you, I did tell you kind of passive aggressively, actually, just like,
Yeah.
oh, you never see aged white tea anymore. And
Oh yeah. Oh, so that was clever. So you were like, it would really be hard to find
crazy if we found aged and I mean, look, there's delivering, there's over delivering, and there's knocking my socks off.
Yeah.
It's so good.
There we go. So this is the 2008. I wish I had more of
that
these,
color.
but as I said, it's we got what we got. And
Look
then
at that
gone.
color. It's like amber. It's
Yeah.
golden. I think that's the color of a damn topaz. I'm
It's
swearing
good.
a lot.
This is good. I like it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, anytime we have guests come on, they like the tea so much they're swearing about it. I think I picked a good one. So yeah, so I think this for me as well, because I also did kind of a flip side version of this, in that I wrote on Chinese TV shows, and I would have to write for Chinese characters as well as for the only foreigner in the sketch, because I was trying to put myself into the sketch.
Sure.
This is the
Yeah,
only
yeah.
way. Like, the writers there, as you said, were never going to wind up writing a role for an American, because they don't know very many Americans.
Right.
So the very good.
Second drink is also quite nice.
It's so it was always a challenge to be able to write things that seemed real. Do you feel that there's like a pressure to do it right above the normal pressure of just writing a good script, because it has to do with like race and culture? Or is it just like any other problem of writing a script well?
I think there's like a different third answer that I'm going to give you.
Okay.
A secret third answer.
That's good.
Which is that I feel a lot of pressure to over deliver, because I think that I don't see any other Indian people. I certainly do not see any women, do not see people who are younger, in these positions, that I feel like if I fuck up once, they'll be like, that's all
You're gonna have a
young
short
Indian
leash.
women. Well,
Yeah.
they'll say
yeah.
every other one is just like her. I feel that pressure quite a lot. So it has less to do with the race and the culture of the script, and maybe more about how I have been socialized. Now that I'm thinking about it, right in this very moment.
Yeah. You're like, maybe it's me.
Maybe
well, there's something.
c'est moi.
No, but there's something to that. I mean, I remember like having a lot of that feeling in like when I was acting in China. Like I would look at these scripts sometimes, and I was like, okay, there's no wrong thing about having an American guy as a villain in any given movie.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, somebody showed me a script where it was like, okay, they're like, we really need a foreign actor for the script, Jesse. I'm like, oh, what does the foreign performer do? And they're like, yeah, so the foreign performer comes into a bar with like 5 women and roofies them all and takes them back. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna play this dude. And it's funny because it's like, that's reprehensible behavior. But the weird reason that first came to my mind is like, I don't want to be the example of reprehensible behavior for everyone that looks like me. It's like, when I should have been like, that's just straight up.
The average guys roofie people too.
Yeah.
Okay, not all white men.
Like, yeah, it's not just like everybody. It's like, and I was like, why did you write this? Like, this doesn't have to be a white guy for this scene to be like, from a storytelling perspective, we're gonna hate that guy, regardless of who it was.
Yeah.
I was like, I almost would rather I would almost rather be like a whatever, an American like cattle rancher, like yeehaw, like that sort of thing. I'm like, well, this is clearly farce. But then I was like, but it made me ask a lot of questions that made me think maybe I should be more of a writer and not an actor. Because if you're an actor, you're like, I got to get the gig. You got to, you're not going to play yourself, so you care more about these things. I think the people who care about getting it right become the writers.
I think it's a bit of both. Writers also are happy to consign their souls for a paycheck, especially in this environment, in this economy, for sure. And you really do have to sort of be like a bit of a yes man when you first get in the door. It's definitely tough no matter what, when you feel like you're representing an entire community and generation and society and species and everything. It's so much more pressure than just typing on a laptop.
Yeah, especially because the stories, like, stories take on this huge power in society.
They're emblematic.
They're emblematic, and it's like, it's one of the reasons why I'm curious to know whether 10,000 years ago, when humans were just a bunch of people sitting around a fire and telling stories, whether anybody was like, oh, there's this guy from this tribe over there, he's the best. Like, he tells the best stories. Or even within a tribe, it must be.
Yes, absolutely.
So like that sort of thing has always been with us, and yet I feel like the writer is in an interesting position because usually the person who's like on the show, like the lead actor, whatever, like people think about the actors, but more and more I think people are realizing that the actors are, I wouldn't say replaceable, but like, the writing is the thing that really makes the show different from every other show.
Yeah.
And then you want to find good actors that elevate the writing. But like, if you have a script and it's written like that, the actors don't change that much.
Yeah.
So the ability to kind of change the river closer to the source to make a really different work, it's actually kind of back at the writing phase. Is that part of the reason you got into writing in the first place, or? Did you do acting at any point?
I think a little bit of acting, but I found that writing is something that I feel more possessive over and adds more catharsis. But I think the reason I kind of can't put it down is because I think everybody needs an example for their humanity. Like you can't create compassion whole cloth. You can't create education whole cloth or hope whole cloth. You kind of need somebody to give you permission to do that. I think risky casting or unusual storytelling has like the human condition, or like look at society today. Like there's obviously there's a long way to go in so many things. But like Hollywood today, or even just like a workplace environment today, is extremely different than what it was, say, 50 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, and people didn't do that because of marches.
Yeah.
They also did that because there was an example put out there for them to recreate in their own lives.
Yeah, especially when it comes to education, I think you're dead on, because like we know this about humans, that if you give them the facts, that is not enough to change behavior.
Yeah.
Like we know this, and sometimes it's it winds up in this weird situation, especially online now, where like reality is dictated not by the facts, but by who is the
narrative.
most efficient storyteller and controls the narrative. Like again, with the narrative, especially when it comes time to stuff with China, like there are real problems between the U.S. and China culturally, and and as far as like politics goes.
Yeah.
But any given person, I'm still able to live my life going back and forth and learn the languages and get great tea, and like I'm having a great time going back and forth. It's very against narrative to do that, but it's like the narrative before of China being like, oh, everything is amazing and like it's the future's being built, and I'm sure it'll just kind of liberalize by itself. That was also a narrative that turned out not to be true.
Yeah.
So, but either way, without the stories, no one can grab onto anything. And I think that's part of the reason why China and Chinese tea and all this stuff has had trouble catching on in the West, is that the narratives that people in the Chinese tea scene are telling themselves about Chinese tea are, one, only being done in China in Chinese, and it's not the narrative that like people without the background in tea are able to access.
Yeah.
If the narrative is too deep, too fast, people don't feel like they can ever catch on.
There's no access there.
Yeah.
I see that there are a lot of, especially in terms of the West understanding Asia, you have to toggle between confirmation bias and challenging a notion. If you are challenging them too much, then people get suspicious and they're like, I don't think that's fucking true.
No, then they're like, you're just challenging everything to be challenged.
To be challenged, and to what end? Confirmation bias tends to sometimes feed into West is best narrative, things like racism, any kind of isms.
Well, it's even just tea, it's shocking sometimes how like when I say like Chinese tea is really good and they're like, oh, I bet you love everything about China, don't you? I'm like, not necessarily. Like, there's nothing from saying Chinese tea is good that you can imply that. Like, just because I say one thing about a culture is good does not mean everything about that culture is good.
Yeah.
But people, I think it's more of a defense mechanism. I think, because like with something like tea, when you tell people a narrative, like the way you drink tea is because a couple British colonialist entrepreneurs made more money selling it that way 170 years ago. And people are like, oh, well now like everything I have drunk and all the tea I like seems like fake somehow.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that isn't necessarily true. And history is complicated, but basically, like the types of ground up tea bag stuff was a way that was able to keep the quality very consistent and low, which meant that the farmers never had any leverage, because what does it matter if you aged the tea well or if you grew it well or whatever, if the company is only going to buy this good tea. And once you grind it all together, the difference between Sister I's 2008 white tea and somebody else's stuff is all obliterated.
Yeah.
So during that time also there was no internet, so there was no way to get the message out. It basically was there are elements of the tea bag which are useful for people, easy to take around, blah, blah, blah. But there's also elements that are just straight up a result of the way of who had control at certain times in history. And in China, where that was never the case, they never drank tea like that. And so it's similar sort of questions like what kind of stories would be told if different people had controls of the levers of power at different times. There would be many different narratives that came out of it.
Certainly. And that's I had a thing I was going to say and I forgot what it was.
Yeah.
I forgot what
I gave you a ramble. That's why I threw you off with my ramble.
I liked the ramble.
The ramble.
It's a good ramble.
But let's get back then to the experience of kind of what writing is like, because writing can be a pretty lonely thing. Would you say that writing is lonely? Like it kind of has to be, like you have to get into a world yourself with your characters or else you can't get it done? Or is it just that maybe people who tend to do work by themselves and like the idea of just being able to set up the laptop and type become writers?
I think that I'm actually, I'm kind of an anomaly. I'm a pretty socialized, I'm a pretty social writer. I like talking things out. I like having conversations with people. I like sort of challenging my notions. But the typing part, I don't mind having like a little typing party, but nobody wants to join me. It's really? Sad. Yeah, I know.
Interesting.
I'm lonely.
It's funny because a lot of my writers that I know, they don't want to have anyone around while they're writing. Maybe it's just self-consciousness.
Probably.
Even just thinking about myself when I do like writing, whether it's writing books or scripts or whatever, I'll oftentimes like kind of be typing, I get stuck, and then my way of working through it is often just to walk up and pace around the room. I don't know if you do this, but I kind of walk it out. I might even, especially because I do like improv background, I might even like play out the scene, acting out the characters.
I talk as the characters.
Yeah.
Certainly, definitely.
See what they say. Like, what would they say if I did this? What do they say if you did this?
Yeah. And like I think in the early days of an idea that I have, I need to talk it out. In the later sections of it, I need to talk it out. In the middle portions, I need to type it out, sort of thing. But early on, because I've been challenging myself a lot, Jesse.
Yes. How
I've been
so?
challenging myself as a writer.
What challenges?
So I mean, initially I started off as a comedy writer,
Yeah.
and then I went to genre, which I really loved. But then I'm seeing like there's like these days, and this is very, very may not really be the standard way of thinking about things. It may actually be totally wrong. But I find that sometimes there are narratives that kind of follow obligatory scene, like follow things in a more expected way, which is really pleasant viewing. You're like, I can binge this whole damn thing.
You don't need to move your brain because you're like, okay, I've kind of already on a subconscious level, I know what the scene will accomplish.
Yeah.
And the only thing left is like kind of what lines did they put in there and where is it happening?
As a viewer, you're like, this is on rails, baby. Like we're going. And then there's a different kind in which you're watching and you're like, what's happening? What is this? And so I really started off as the type A kind of writer, the kind of like the jokes are unexpected, sure, and the character's wild, but there are certain things that you're meant to accomplish on this journey. And I'm trying to see now, how far can I push it in the opposite direction?
What kind of challenges have you given yourself to try to do this? Like,
so I don't want to pitch my show here, but I'm like, because this is just something I'm writing for myself.
Nice.
But I'm taking the idea of a coming of age story and sticking that with revenge. And I'm like trying to see how far you can take this, because mostly revenge stories tend to be like the Count of Monte Cristo, where it's like every episode I will take down another person who screwed over my father.
there are 7 people that destroyed my life, and every episode, luckily, we have 7 episodes.
I slashed them in the face.
God, that was convenient. It'd be very inconvenient if we had 8, but only 7 episodes.
What do you know?
One of them would be,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of problems. But
What are the odds of that? And then in the final thing, I can't kill the last guy, and we have to have a duel.
But even if you had 7 people that needed to be killed over 7 episodes, you could, in theory, subvert that by, failing and then blowing up 3 of them at once in a car.
Yeah,
you still have the ways of subversion, but it sounds like from what you're saying that you kind of want to go beyond that.
Even beyond that.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if what I'm doing is like in any way makeable or doable or even good. But I will say that I'm learning a lot from it by like stretching myself as much like a rubber band as physically possible. Maybe I'll go like so far off the line, the line becomes a circle, and we're right back.
And you're
you
like,
never know.
I want to write a rom-com. Like,
oh my God, it's a musical.
Well, I think everything is revenge musical would be good. I'm liking it already.
No, don't do this to me.
But yeah, so this is interesting though, because I feel like a lot of people when they want to expand their skill set, they need to take on challenges. We all know that taking on the challenge is the best way to expand the skill set. How do you actually hold yourself to doing that though? Because it's very easy. I have jokes that work. If I go on and do them, I know the audience will laugh. Really what I should be doing is making sure that I have new material every time I go on stage, at least a little of it, so I can test new jokes. It's easy to just kind of do the ones that work. How do you actually get yourself to do the challenging thing? Do you have any tricks?
A little bit. So I have people to hold me accountable. So in certain things, for instance, like Plan B, right? That was a road trip movie about getting the Plan B pill.
Yeah.
Certain things. A, there will be a road. They're going on said trip. The Plan B pill will be at some point addressed. Okay. And on this journey, that there's going to be pitfalls, and there's going to be, and because the 2 characters are best friends, that there's going to be a friendship challenge at some point. These check. These are all obvious things. But what I am doing, just to teach myself more about how to push myself, is I'll come up with a premise and then be like, where the fuck is this taking me? I actually don't know. And then I sweat for a long time.
Do you want to be in that don't know area, or is it unintentional to be in the don't know area?
It's intentional to challenge myself. It's not intentional for the best storytelling of my life.
Yeah.
It is intentional so that I can just keep myself like sort of moving quick and dirty almost. So, oh my gosh.
Ayo.
No,
not the tea. Let's dry that off. But yeah, you're saying for the best storytelling of your life, it's not going to work like that.
I mean, for the best storytelling of my life, I think maybe it could work like that. But for instance, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, incredible movie, right? But even when I was watching it, I was like, what the what? Like, what is happening?
It's a lot.
I
will say it was really helpful to speak Mandarin to watch that movie.
Sure.
I was watching the movie, I'm like, this is great. Like, this is how I think.
Yeah.
And then I was watching it with 5 of my friends from college. one of whom spoke Cantonese but not Mandarin, and nobody else spoke anything. And I was like, I thought they did that great. And then they were like, it was really confusing. I'm like, which part? But even then, it was fast.
It was fast, for sure.
It was meant to be, or I don't say it was meant to be disorienting, but they clearly did not care if there were sections where you were disoriented.
Totally, absolutely.
They were.
What I like about it.
It almost seemed like they liked the fact that they knew they were being mean to you.
I liked it. I was like, be mean to you. But you kind of understood what the ending was going to be based on the beginning with her relationship, right? But you kind of, but the middle, the whole journey, you're like, where is this guy? I don't even know, like, hoo-ha, sort of thing. But the ending was not so surprising because of the relationships that were set up in the beginning. And I saw that and I was really inspired by that. So I was like, okay, it's not my version of the multiverse. It is my version of, if I were to take this as far as it's going to go, where is this taking me? What am I trying to say about myself? Because it's so stupid. There was an application I saw, and the application question was, why are you writing? Not why did you become a writer? Why are you writing?
Just at all.
At all. And so I was like, I'm going to answer this question. And I started answering the question.
Because I am deeply wounded. Yeah, like that. No, that's whatever it is. Yeah.
I mean, I started writing the question, or writing the answer, and then it just kept going and going and going and going.
Interesting.
And I was like, I didn't even know this is why I did this. But then I realized that there's like so much subconsciously happening in every single person. Not that it's begging to come out, but like it's there, and it's just a buried treasure waiting.
Well, a lot of times, like people, this is super true with comedy. Like a lot of times, like if I teach comedy classes, I'll try to get people to brainstorm comedy ideas, and they kind of struggle. And then when I ask them to say something like, tell me what's just like going on in your life, they'll say stuff that's like really funny. And I'm like, that's it right there. No, but nobody cares about that. I'm like, no, that's exactly what everyone will care about. It's like we're so close to it often that we don't see it. And that was definitely sort of the thing, like, I got stuck in that like loop for a long time in China, where I had this whole phase of my time as a writer where I refused to write my characters as the white comedian character as any different from any of the other Chinese characters, because I was like, this is the one thing I don't see that I wish I saw, was just like three guys hanging out, and one of them was a foreigner, but they were friends, and there was like, it wasn't a thing. And then I would make these sketches and people would read them and they're like, this is an okay sketch, but how'd you get there? Like, the character still needs to be explained. So like skipping over the thing that I was dealing with, which was frustration of like, trying to get my life onto the screen. My life was one where I had been in China for 7 years and I had a bunch of good friends. And when we meet up with each other, we don't talk like, oh my gosh, you speak Chinese. Like, we don't do that. But for the character, it's like, does putting that character in that way wind up doing the education that I'm trying to do? Not clear. But I definitely didn't want to lose some of that energy, because part of the why I was writing was in that energy,
so then
right?
Why are you writing?
Why am I writing?
Why are you writing?
Well, I mean, it's a really good creative question to ask yourself every now and then, and it can also refocus you on which projects are the right ones to take, or to be able to say, okay, this project is not really why I do this for a living, so you better pay me, because otherwise there's like, the reason I would do your project is because it will support the other stuff I want to do. Or sometimes the opposite, to say like, I'm not really going to get paid for this, but this is exactly why I do it, and who am I if I don't take this project on, Well, let's take a break anyway so I can reboil the water, and we'll be right back in just one moment, talk more about writing and about why we write.
Why we write.
We'll figure it out. I'm Jesse.
I'm Prathi.
And we'll be right back. I don't know whether we've started or not officially,
sorry.
we're welcome back. I'm Jesse.
I'm hungry.
Yes, and we are doing a 2000. I know, well, you are. I'm not going to tell you how to introduce yourself. You should be who you are. And if you're hungry, you're hungry. We're having Hungry on the podcast. She's a comedy writer and a big fan of white tea. And what have you thought of this 2008 white tea?
The first sip I had was like a tiny orgasm.
It was so good.
It was so good. But
You got to put that on the packaging.
Yeah, totally. That's some good copy for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's only getting better. I'd say that this is an unusual white tea to me because the color is so rich.
So that's the aging. That's, as it ages, it gets darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
And so that color is one of the things I look for when they say, "Oh, this tea is old." I'm like, "Is it?"
Isn't.
And then I
It's
like to
amber.
see. I like to see that very, very dark color there.
It has like kind of, it's not like a funky flavor or not mushroomy. It does taste very singularly itself, which is a very unusual thing, because usually with teas, like you can kind of taste the other qualities in it, but this purely tastes of white tea.
It's good, man. It's got an herbal note, like the sort of like in Chinese, it could be like 中药, where like Chinese medicinal flavor
totally,
to it.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And then in the beginning of most white teas, in the beginning you get this really nice fragrance, and then here by steep 7, 8, 9 or whatever, we're getting more flavor. So it's kind of, it's not as kind of like nosy, flowery, but it has much more like punch to it.
It almost tastes like in the beginning we had like white petals of a plant, and now it tastes like closer to the root of the plant.
This is cool. Well, that's one of the fun things about doing the Gongfu style is like you get to taste the progression. Sometimes people are like, if I want to, can I just make big mugs of it or even a big teapot? And I'm like, you can, but all of those steeps are you're kind of combining the second, third, the fourth steep together into one thing, which can be good. But it's also kind of fun to be able to see the way that the tea changes over the time. So.
It was also, because again, I don't know tea as well as Jesse, even 1/16th, not even 1/50th. But you know what's kind of fun about like a good white tea? To me, the element, because I drink a lot of white tea when I'm typing, so this reminds me of 3 a.m.
Oh yeah,
3 a.m.
you're all of a sudden you're like, why is it so light out?
I'm being trained. No, for sure.
Your body is like, normally when I drink this. Like,
yeah, white tea is what I drink a lot when I'm in the thick of a story, for sure, and I like to do that early in the morning or late at night where nobody's around. It's very quiet and it's kind of cold, and I know it's really good when my teeth squeak.
Your teeth are squeaking.
My teeth will squeak from a little bit. What
are they saying? Are they saying something to you? Or
my literal teeth will start to squeak from the astringent of the tea.
So you got it down. It sounds like you're like a white tea. You know where you want to have it. You will know when you want to have it.
It's Pavlovian.
It's great. Well, that's good. We're all, and I hope you guys have been trained to be enjoying the Jesse Seahouse podcast, and so we're coming right back at it. So getting back into the topic of writing, I mean, I love talking about writing in general because I feel like so many things nowadays, it's like if you can write and you can tell a story, you can do almost anything. If you were just like, I want to be an amateur volcano explorer and I'm going to make videos and write stories and write blogs and write everything, just like tell the story of loving these volcanoes. You can do that nowadays. It's like, we're here having a tea and doing a tea podcast. So I always feel like writing is like a way to be able to explore all the things you want to be able to talk about. Is that part of why you like writing as well, and how has that kind of impacted the types of projects that you've written for?
I think it's mostly that I felt really stupid for a fucking long time.
Why did you feel stupid, and how does that come into writing?
So I had a really bad speech impediment, and I've had, I think, maybe $35,000 worth of vocology lessons.
Oh, wow. Did it work? Did it help you a lot? I mean,
I sound okay now.
You sound great.
Unless I sound like total shit.
No, but I mean, you never knew. I mean, not to bring any sort of thing into you, is like people have told me I talk weird.
You do.
I do?
No, you don't. No, you're fine. No, you're fine.
No. Apparently I do, but it hasn't. It's kind of a weird thing. Like maybe I should fix it, but on the other hand, I've made my living talking.
Yeah.
So it can't be that bad, right?
For me, it was really bad. I had a very bad stutter.
Yeah.
And it's also genetic, because my mom has a bit of a stutter, my uncle has a bit of a stutter. I have the worst one by far. Could not get a bloody word out.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. And then I grew up like with braces and glasses, and also was kind of chubsy. So man, it was rough going. So.
You were like all 5 of the powers combined.
All of them, but like, for like a shit situation. But I'll find that like conventional attractiveness and conventional beauty can oftentimes inform your competence or your perceived competence. People will think you're stupid if you're not pretty enough to say that you're smart. So I knew that I was smart, but there was no way of me proving that.
Interesting.
And then if people were like, you're stupid, I had no words to be able to correct it either. So I felt kind of like almost I had a sort of cognitive or imaginatory like locked in syndrome. I had no way to prove my worth except for I was like, well, a pen can't stutter on me. So I think I just used that as the only way to communicate with the world. And then via doing that, I was like, no, I'm actually really good at this. And then, as is the case with any coming of age story, I became very close with my English teachers. because the way that I was on the outside did not match what I was putting down on the page. And I think that was surprising for a lot of people, and that caused a bit of intrigue. And then I was like, oh, I'm intriguing. Are people curious about me?
Kind of like, so you can kind of like focus on where you're getting the like positive reinforcement from.
Yes. People definitely suddenly had interest in me in a way that they never, in a way that I was so fundamentally disregarded. And it was quite, it was shocking. And it was great. And I felt so good about it.
Do you feel like now looking back at sort of the way in, do you think that it's ultimately a good thing that those were your initial reasons for coming into doing writing? Or are you thinking now like, oh, well, like, you know, it wasn't like you weren't smart if you didn't write.
Yeah.
You know, how do you feel about that now?
I feel kind of two ways about it. On one hand, because I also was a really late reader. I was basically illiterate till I was like 8. Because no one really gave a shit about me. I kind of felt like if I lived or died, would anyone notice? You know, I mean, that's like a very dramatic way of putting it, but hey, I'm an artist, and like, let me have that.
But at the time, that's how you felt. Kind of.
I just kind of felt like I am, at best, I should be convenient for others. But it doesn't matter what I want, it doesn't matter who I am, it doesn't matter any of these things, blah, 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 blah.
There's a weird flip to that, the service, like you want to be of service to others, I think that's a good thing, but to need to be of service to others, that's not, like, you know, you want to have more like, you know, self-worth is not the right word, but like to be able to insist that for yourself is a challenge, and it's something that a lot of people never get there.
I think it's like ultimately a very hideous thing to make somebody's value be based upon their convenience to others, because I have my own life and I will be self-possessed within it, and I think my value is based upon the impact I have upon my life and others, not the convenience and not how easy it is to run roughshod over me and sort of thing. So I was like, okay, like that's just not how it's going to be for me, and I just don't know what to do about it. So I picked up a pen, and then over time I realized that putting words to things solidifies my my reality. Like, kind of like if I feel bad about something, I'm not sure why I feel bad about it, but if I can write it out, then I can sort of put together what is creating this thing that I don't like or what I do like. Yeah.
And it's also the writing. I find that writing anything, whether it's a story that I really just need to get out of my head, or whether it's like, okay, podcast recording at 1 p.m., whatever it is, it frees up the room in my head to think about other things.
Yeah.
You know, the writing is really therapeutic in that way.
Very therapeutic.
You know? I mean, I remember it was I think my sort of like junior or senior year of high school. I finally got to the point where I had too many things going on that I just couldn't keep it all in my own head, and I started to have a schedule and tried to do this. And it doesn't come naturally to me at all because I have ADHD and I'm all over the place. So like, but forcing myself to be able to like kind of schedule stuff, you know, to-do list sort of things. These are very basic tools, but it was shocking how effective it was. Even if I didn't achieve more, even if I didn't do the things on the to-do list, I felt better because I had made the list and it was now out of my head.
Yeah.
And then of course with storytelling, and the cool thing about it is if you do that every day continually, eventually you have a story, and now the thing that's out of your head is actually interesting to other people too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was kind of part of the way that you got into the writing. And then do you feel like now on the other side of the speech therapy and on the other side of the braces or anything like that, do you feel like you need another reason to write now, or you've just gotten so into it that now the initial reasons for starting are not as relevant to you right now?
So that's kind of an interesting question, which is that, again, like a lot of like artistic people from conservative cultures will oftentimes either give up on the thing that they're wanting to do because their families are like fucked to the no, and then you feel sort of the pressure, or you feel the guilt, and you feel the obligation to put that craft down. And that's one path to take, and it's a completely relevant, completely valid path to take. When people do the other thing, when they're like, no, I'm gonna put it all at risk and I'm gonna do this thing, they do this thing out of rage, out of defiance.
You have to win.
oh yeah, it's like you think you know what, you know, just like you like flip a table and you like lose your mind, and then you do it and you do it and you do it, and then you're like, I'm breaking it, and then you do the thing, and then your parents are like, good job. You're like, no.
Oh no.
No. It's the opposite.
Now you're like,
now that you have proven yourself.
Oh, you lost the rage. That was what was driving you.
Oops. Yeah, you're like, your family is suddenly like, I have always loved you. I've always believed in you. You're the apple of my eye, and I knew you could do it. And they're kissing both your cheeks, and they're giving you your favorite foods. Like, my mom literally made food for an army when I came home.
Oh,
and
wow.
it was every single one of my favorite foods, exactly how I like it. And then my dad spent the afternoon hand feeding me.
Oh, wow.
Like, because that's very common in Indian culture when you're a little kid. But they were like, you're our baby, and you're this and you're that, and you're
like, where was this at the beginning?
It wasn't even that. I was like,
what's going on here?
I mean, I was like, oh yeah, I was so angry that you told me that I couldn't do this that I forgot how much you loved me. I thought that anger was all I really had because it's fucking motivating. And then I was like, oh yeah, there are complexities to you too, and you guys really love me a lot. And then I was like, I'm gonna write today, and it was like, it was like
you lost the energy.
All the wind in my sails had died. And so then I was like, if I'm not writing out of rage and defiance and fuck you, and I'll tell you what I don't tell you who the fuck I am. You know, you don't tell me who the fuck you don't tell me who I am. I'll tell you who I am. If I'm not doing that, who am I? And what am I doing? And I had to rediscover, and I'm still rediscovering.
Well, I was gonna say, what's the answer?
Still rediscovering my what keeps me going isn't really anger and defiance. It's something quieter. It's more of a white tea. Which is an overwhelming sense of love and displacement at the same time. Like, everybody, I think, has to discover their core wound or whatever, but that is not, it's not good enough to discover your wound. It is something you have to ask yourself of, because I have this thing that hurt me early on, what do I have to offer? And I realized what it is for me while I was writing that prompt. Why do you keep writing? Why do you write? And I think it's because I spent a long time trying to afford myself, if that makes any sense, which is like, I think as a girl and as a person of color and blah, 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 who cares, all those statistics about me, you just put yourself on a pedestal. And I just didn't really feel good enough for it, or it felt like it wasn't really real.
You felt you had to earn your way into whatever it was you got.
So I would do whatever I could to kind of reduce myself. Like, just what is it to live this life where there's so much pressure to be the absolute best, and to be pure, and to be conservative, and to be conventional, and to be all these things. I know what I'm supposed to be, and I'll never be it.
You chafe against it.
Yeah, and so I think writing was my way of finding a narrative in which I can belong to myself.
Because that makes a lot of sense. I think that there's sometimes when we have those things that we dislike about ourselves, whether it's like, okay, maybe this is just the way we're brought up. There's no going back. You can't undo the way you were brought up, or you can't undo really either the good or the bad experiences. It's all stuck in there. So the question in the short term is like, okay, well, how do which of these aspects of myself do I allow to actually drive me and determine the direction I'm going? But that's, in my mind, only a short-term way of doing it, because it hasn't dealt with any of the actual stuff. It's just saying, okay, which of these things that exist do I choose to deal with? And I guess a deeper question is how to tie it all together. I feel like I'm still, even now 4 years after being essentially kind of moving back to America unexpectedly, I'm still trying to figure out how that relates in terms of my time I spent in China and my life here in the States. And it's, on some days I'm kind of okay or even excited about the fact that I basically kind of am like a Chinese immigrant in America. Like, everybody I know is basically a Chinese immigrant, or somebody who was introduced to me by a Chinese immigrant, or an American like me that lived in China a long time and came back. I don't know that many people outside of that sphere. On the other hand, other times I'm like, well, there's so much more for you here, because there's just because these people are people you like to hang out with and this is a scene you like, it doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't explore other stuff. But in order to go into that other sphere, I need to be able to know enough about myself to tell people who I am. And rediscovering, or that sort of constant rediscovering and thinking about who you actually are is, I want to say, the first thing that came to my mind was just exhausting. It just takes a lot of energy. And but on the other hand, I feel like it is to some degree that sort of superpower, because if you figure it out, that will give you the drive to be able to do these different projects. Okay, now I know why it's there, and maybe that can replace the rage or whatever it was for you that was doing it. Do you feel like you've replaced the rage?
Yes, with a far more dangerous thing.
Oh, what's the next one?
I tend to embrace now cognitive dissonance.
Ooh, I love it.
I find it so creepy and weird, and it's like the kind of thing that can creep under your skin and just live there.
It's good. It sounds like a good backing for like a horror movie. Like,
great for horror movies, but it tends to be great for romance.
For drama and romance as well. Like,
Totally.
how do I love this guy, but I hate him, but I love him. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like a lot of, or even people's ideas of their home countries, which is, I love this place and yet it scares me.
Yeah.
I'm not from this place and yet it's my home. Like things like that, and yet, and that I find to be something that, more than like propelling you forward to write the next draft, it's the thing that creeps up on you in the middle of the night and pulls the covers up.
And the cool thing about the cognitive dissonance is, I love this. I'm a big fan of cognitive dissonance as I sit in Los Angeles drinking my Chinese tea in a weird kind of Chinese tea backdrop I've created in my own home. What's going on? But the cognitive dissonance is interesting to me artistically, because there is no clear right answer. And it almost is, by definition, there won't be, because we kind of have like storytelling around the fire 1.0. There's a bad guy, there's a good guy, there's a struggle, somebody wins. Maybe storytelling 2.0 is like, what is bad, what is good? But there's kind of still a bad guy and still a good guy if we could figure that out. And the challenge with cognitive dissonance, and why it's so frustrating for people and why it's so challenging, is because it's entirely possible there is no villain, or there is no...
Or you're the villain.
Or what does it mean if you're the villain if you really tried, and you're still the villain? I think about that sometimes, even I lived in Beijing. This area of Beijing is like all the old Beijingers are getting moved out of town because the out-of-towners are coming in and built and taking up the property. This is happening with Chinese people. It's not like a Western thing per se, but I'm definitely one of those people coming in. And so I'm like, but I love Beijing.
Am I part of the problem?
I know I'm part of that problem, but I'm also solution to something else that I feel really needs to be done, which is cultural communication. China needs people that have lived in Beijing to be able to tell real stories. But if you can only live in the furthest outskirts of Beijing because there's a law that says the foreigners don't get to live here, now you're never going to have that experience. So like, you are the villain to somebody, and you're also the hero to somebody. And that just may be the way it is.
So then I guess you have to ask yourself, I think, how do you balance cognitive dissonance and inertia? It's really like, a lot of people would be like, oh God, but this and that, what about this? And cognitive dissonance can make you seesaw. And then what have you done, bitch? But you've thought thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't do nothing.
And that's honestly a good way of looking at it, because I feel like when I feel like I'm not feeling well, it's because that dissonance has caused me to grind to a halt. And the lack of movement makes the thinking even worse, because now you're just thinking all day.
ADHD brain.
ADHD brain, so like, and this thing can overclock and just kind of keep going. And that's why sometimes I will write projects that I have no intention of actually making or producing or going forward. I just need to make something right now because this idea is in my head, and I need to be making stuff, and I'll feel less stuck than before.
I agree with that, for sure. And that's actually why I'm doing a lot of that. I was telling you about like the writing I'm doing to challenge myself. It's to sort of sit inside of that like gray area without just producing more gray area. It's to sit inside that like kind of mucky place, and then be like, how do I cut through this? What am I doing about this, and what is it saying about myself? So it gives me, weirdly, while I'm typing sometimes, I start to sweat and I get like really anxious and I get very uncomfortable. But
does that mean you're doing it right?
I don't know yet.
You're like, oh, maybe I'm just uncomfortable.
But it is making me do something. So it's making me change something. And that, I mean, maybe it's making me into a certain type of thinker. You never know. because I mean, Emily in Paris, for instance, is not a show that promotes much cognitive dissonance. But I think it's a really great show to work on because I forget sometimes, like, I get so interested in doing things, but there is an audience to service. There are people who are going to watch this, and Emily in Paris is a great show for people who just want to feel good, who just want to watch things and feel good. And that's what drew me to TV to begin with.
Yeah. No one's like, I like watching shows because I want to feel horrible.
Yeah. Exactly. Nobody necessarily needs to feel the way that I feel, right? Like when I'm typing those like gray area things where I'm like sweating and anxious, like that's like a really uncomfortable thing to watch.
And yet there's something about you that must enjoy it because you choose to spend your time doing that. And again, for people that don't know, you're either getting paid to write or you're not. So anything you're writing that even hopefully speculatively may get bought one day, you're paying for it now by paying rent.
Yes.
And like, you know, you have to buy that day from yourself.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's my whole goal for my creative career in the beginning was I want to buy all my time back from capitalism. I want to be able to choose the projects I work on, not fully independently of money, but just to really be able to say like, is this a project I want to take on or not? And if I had enough money, I was like, it was easier in China because the cost of living was lower. But it's like, what would you need to, like, if you got quote unquote the sellout job where you're like, okay, you're teaching English or you're doing, you know, advertising at a company, whatever that thing is, how much would you make? Okay, that's how much you need to be able to pay yourself to do whatever you want to do. And if you have the savings to do it, you can do it. Yeah. And so, and you do entirely different projects after having that mentality than not having it. But you have to pay yourself to do the work.
That's a really good way of putting things. Actually, I'm going to call you again for motivation, okay?
Yes, you should do it. I like it.
I'm literally going to do that.
You got to do it. And I'll help you out. Because I love motivate. Like, there's one thing I love. It's like motivating other people that make stuff. And all my friends will tell you this. Because so many people, I think, like truly have really good ideas they want to do. They have the skill to do it. And there's something between being able to and wanting to and actually doing it that is a really hard lump to get over. Yeah. But it's a fake lump. It's not like, you know, with exceptions. If you're an action movie guy and the thing you want to do is blow up a car, you kind of have to have explosives in a car. But for almost everything, there is some version of the thing you want to do that you can produce for almost $0. And then like, you know, maybe you can't shoot the movie, but you can write the script and you can hold a reading with your friends and you'll get 70% of the juice in your head from seeing that story play out, and you never know what'll happen now that you have a full script. Yeah. But like, and yes, it's a big amount of work to do the script, but isn't that what you want to do in the first place? Yes, like the fun was doing the work. Absolutely. So like, yeah, so I think that sort of it's made me think about like making my stuff, yes, commercially viable for sure, but also quite specific, because I'm lucky I have Emily in Paris as the outlet where, I mean, it is obviously very, very specific, but it's so cute and it's so fun, it's life affirming, it's a joy to work on, it's a joy to watch. So then I'm like, where do my mucky feelings go? Yeah, exactly. Woo. Well, I try to balance. I did improv and stand-up for a long time, and not a lot of people do both, but I felt it was a great balance. Improv is always fun. This show could be the worst show ever. I'm gonna have fun with my friends, and that's gonna be great. And stand-up, it's like, you really have to struggle to make good material. Yeah. And like, being backstage at a stand-up show is not anywhere near as much fun as being backstage at an improv show. Sure. Backstage is like everyone's just drunk and angry at themselves. Yeah, they're like kind of doing this, and like there's also this weird element about support where like you want the people in front of you to do good enough to get the crowd going, but not better than you. Yeah. And it's so that, and like I almost would prefer a more truthful, I just want you to fail. Like, yeah, like even if that's it, like, you know, I'd be like, okay, you want me to fail? That's fine. That's almost better than this weird, I want you to succeed just enough to keep you below me. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't like that energy. I try not to put that energy
That's like having siblings.
Yeah, is that what it is? It's like, I have an older brother, but I think we kind of, we took such different paths in life that it's not really so much of a
So did mine. My sister's lovely. She's amazing. She's older than me. Yeah. And she and I took very different paths. But
going back to the cognitive dissonance, how do you deal with the dissonance in your life, and is it something that you know, clearly creatively you almost run towards it, but in your daily life, not as a writer, do you run away from it? Or how does it work?
So I tend to be a bit of a problem solver by nature. I'm like, there's an issue here, I'll solve it. So I'm kind of like a hammer, I see everything as a nail, which makes having a personal life confusing.
Why? How so? Just like you just kind of like, because a personal life is not a problem to be solved.
Exactly.
You know?
It's a thing to sort of experience, but then I'm like, how do I know how I feel about it? If it's not a thing to be solved, if it's not a knot that I'm unknotting, then is this like good or is this bad? And like, how do I know if someone annoys me or treats me poorly? It's not grounds for dismissal, but how many times is too many times?
Yeah.
And then I can't spend all day confronting people. Like you treated me badly this one time.
Yeah.
And this third time, and this fourth time, and this fifth time. Should I just ghost? Like I don't know the social protocol here. Like what's the etiquette?
What's your go-to now?
Ghosting.
Yeah, just ghosting.
No,
Yeah,
it's not. It's not. It isn't. My go-to is to clench my teeth and get through it. But
this is the whole thing. Is like your social life shouldn't be something that you clench your teeth and get through.
Yeah,
you know, like
exactly.
I feel that as well. I mean, I've kind of had this weird, probably pretty similar to that sense, that this thing where I've combined the things I like to do for my hobbies with my work in many ways so closely it's hard to tie them apart. And I think that there are challenges that are brought on by that. I personally think the advantages are far outweigh the challenges. You know, I would not want to be spending 9 to 5 every day doing something I don't really like. I'd rather suffer through figuring out a way to do what I want to do, even if it's whatever 7 to 7 instead of 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But it also does create this you know, I've trained the pathways in my brain to be like, oh, you're enjoying this new thing and you're a storyteller, you should be telling people about this story. And I'm like, no, it's not really, doesn't really help my career or my life to tell random stories about random things. But there's a part of me that kind of wishes that it had that outlet, maybe of, like, as you said, for this type of thought, you have the Emily in Paris show that you can write. And for other types of shows, other type of thoughts, you can write other shows. And so being able to choose where and how you tell those stories is really nice. It's a good.
It is really nice.
It's a good thing to have.
Yeah, you got to have both. Gotta have both for sure.
Do you feel like the spending too much time in the cognitive dissonance mode just drags you down though? Because it takes up energy.
Yeah, it does for sure. Sometimes, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Well, yes. Because I sometimes think about you know, people who are, I have some friends of mine that are, you know, very capable of the sort of cognitive dissonance stuff. Some American friends of mine, thinking about one guy in particular who lived in China for many years. He also lived in Japan, now he lives in Taiwan. He's got like a good mindset on stuff. And I think he intellectually understands all the challenges and understands the sort of like, you know, oh, you're American living in Taiwan. He's married to a Japanese woman. They are raising a child in Taiwan. There's a lot of dissonance that's going on there. But he just seems to get through it. He doesn't seem to be stuck on it. And I think that I would be more stuck on it if it were me. I'd just be like, what does it mean? How do I raise a kid in an environment so different than I brought up in, and they're different situations? Oh, it's just so different. I'd get kind of stuck on it. Do you feel like you almost envy the people that don't get stuck on it, or are you happy to deal with the problems even though it comes with madness? I
think when I was younger, I envied the simplicity of people's lives, because Indian culture and American culture are the two most diametrically opposed cultures.
You think that they're really diametrically? Why so?
Extremely.
How so?
On everything.
On like how are they opposed?
A really obvious one would be beauty standards. Another really obvious one would be stances on sex and relationships. Diametrically opposed. Relationships with parents. How do you value yourself and how do you value others? Also diametrically opposed. Like literally, there's nothing in common with the two.
Wow.
Cuisine.
Yeah, food.
American
very different.
Food. Sucks, dude.
Yeah. But like, so how do you deal with these different expectations from, I guess it's not even the Indian side of your family, like the Indian side of your identity, yeah. And then the American side now living here for so long.
Delusion.
Delusion is useful.
Delusion is very useful. But like, so growing up, it was really like I was constantly seesawing between these two expectations, and I felt like I was losing out on both, which really was very difficult. I think a lot of Indian people can also understand that. But then as I grew up and I took this veering left turn off the right path and into the arts, the cognitive dissonance has lessened by a lot. So now it's sort of like I can be in a more state of reflection, as opposed to actively kind of seesawing on like constantly just like spinning plates and just dropping both plates. So I think it's been helpful to enter my 30s.
That's good. That's sort of, you know, it's why I encourage everybody to make stuff. because it doesn't I think a lot of people have this mistaken idea that you're not an artist unless you make your main living from your art. And it's like, no, man, you have to make stuff because human beings go crazy if they don't make stuff.
Yeah.
And even that stuff that you make, you don't necessarily have to share it, although I do believe it's a valuable process to put yourself through to be able to share your stuff, whether it's good or not. It's just sort of like, it's a barrier that a lot of times you think you can't do stuff, and then you can punch through these barriers by doing something. This is why I encourage everybody to take one improv class, do one stand-up set.
Absolutely agree.
Get on stage and tell jokes, even if you bomb, just so you know that you can do it. And even if you bomb, nothing happens.
Yeah.
You get off and you're still you the next day, and nobody came and slapped you in the face because you were so bad. No, you just weren't funny, but that's okay. But some people will spend 20 years on that precipice of I really want to try it, and I just can't share the thing.
Yeah.
So you can write as many jokes as you want without sharing them. But to go back to what I was saying, that making stuff helps deal with these things. And I think that in some ways, even the tea, the Chinese comedy, all that stuff, all of this constant making is really the live playing out of me trying to figure out the answers to these questions, because I don't know the answers either. And I was thinking about it the other day, where the old explorers, before the whole Earth was mapped, they would be able to go out and they could explore, oh, here be dragons. We don't know what's there. And geographically, we kind of have a look over the whole globe now. But I think for our generation, culture is the new map that hasn't been mapped. We know there are different cultures that exist, but what about where they meet? And the deeper down you go, you realize that, every culture has been impacted by every other culture for 1,000 years in different ways, in different shapes. And then new stuff is coming up all the time. So the map is constantly changing, but the map is still there.
Yeah.
So I feel like, for all creative people, whether it's through TV, whether it's through movies, whether it's through tea or podcasting or whatever, I'm just really glad to be able to spend my time exploring. So
The human condition is pretty chronic.
it's never going away.
It's never going away.
It's never going away.
All we ever do is bustle against each other and hope that we're liked.
That's a great way to end the podcast. So no, it's
Goodbye.
great. Yeah. So and if you're a human, it never gets better, and it never gets worse.
Drink some white tea.
Drink some white tea. Enjoy it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Cheers.
Hope you had a good time. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. For all of you who are listening and watching, this is the tea that we're having today, Sister I's 2008 white tea. This may or may not be sold out by the time you get to it. If it's still on there, it's worth what we're charging for it.
So good.
There's also, we have a 2014-2015 blend, which is from the same farmer, same farm, but just a couple years younger. Even then, though, that's 10 years age, so that's pretty good. All the tea stuff, the equipment, this is all available on the website if you guys would like to have some. And if you'd ever like to, if you ever have suggestions for people that we should have on the podcast, put them in the comments. Let us know what you thought about this one. And in the meantime, thank you so much for coming over. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good time, guys. I'm Jesse.
I'm Prathi.
And we'll see you next podcast.